Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third edition of Join Our Newsroom. As I continue to admit members, I'd like to welcome John Allan to say a word. John Allan. Okay, as we give him a moment, I'll give you an introduction about myself. My name is Catherine Wema. I work for Africa Uncensored as a Products and Operations Manager. And tonight I'll be your host. I'll take this opportunity to introduce our web and fact check editor, Mr. Emmanuel Chenze, to give us a brief introduction about himself, and then we can head straight to the topic of the day. Unless, John Allan, you'd like to say something.
No, thanks a lot for standing in, Kathy and everybody from Africa Uncensored. Thanks a lot again, everyone who's joined. I see some familiar faces, Kahawa and Preston as well, Karibu Tena. Well, it's really just to thank you once again for joining and to get the conversation started. Chenze is part of the Africa Uncensored team. As Kathy said, she's going to allow him to introduce himself. Then now we can get into the conversation. The conversations about data security in the light of what seemed to be a very, I don't know, how shall I say, daring, intrusive data breach related to the Office of the Political Registrar, the Registrar of Political Parties. So, Emmanuel Chenze, let's see you on camera and you can introduce yourself to the team.
Hi everyone, kama mlivyosikia, I'm Emmanuel Chenze and I work at Africa Uncensored as the web editor. Yeah, I think that's the much I'd say about me. And for the purposes of today, I'm here to talk about something that probably some of you did and probably you were worried about. In the, when was it, 2 weeks ago or something? Yeah, it come out, and basically that you've been registered against your will as a member of a political party somewhere. So basically what this has done, at least from my point of view and the kind of interactions I had at that time, is just opened an entire discussion about issues about data privacy, what's happening to what, and also opened room for a lot of misinformation and the same, and panic and so many other things. Yeah, I don't know, where should I start?
So Chenze, perhaps the best place to start would be at the beginning, but before we do, just some housekeeping rules. For those who are new to this call, I see a couple of new names and faces. When you'd like to, this is really a conversation that helps us understand what is affecting you in your, what's affecting your media diet, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like Africa Uncensored to try and investigate or report more about. And so in as much as the conversation is about data security, privacy, data breaches, panic, misinformation, disinformation a lot, it's really an opportunity for us to hear from you what these things might be that bother you about how Kenya's press covers these issues and what you'd like to see more of. Now to the housekeeping rules, if you'd like to make a comment at any point in the conversation, just use the tabs at the bottom of the screen under reactions to raise your hand. And Kathy, who's running the show and at the back end will notify Chenze, or if Chenze sees one, then we can get a question asked and answered. That's really it. So Chenze, the first place to start, of course, is the beginning. 2 weeks ago, what were you doing that led you to find out this very interesting thing before even publishing this, right?
Maybe something you could do is allow me to go and leave often. Yeah, 2 weeks ago, I was on a break and I was at home at the coast, and that so I had quite a bit of free time. And some of you might know my spare time is spent on lots of tech issues because that's my unhealthy obsession. And yeah, in this case, this was an interesting coincidence. I think it was around over the weekend, and there had been some developments that had made me come back to interact with eCitizen more than I have in the past. First of all, there was a new payment option added, which you can now pay on eCitizen using Telkom's mobile money service. And then secondly, I lost a loved one around this time last year, and I was checking how we can process some of their documents and all of those. Now I can't do that when I'm in Nairobi, but when I go home, I can do that and then follow up with the local office, because that's not every other service that is on eCitizen is supposed to be accessed by people who are not in Nairobi. So that in the process of that, I noticed that the Office of the Attorney General had added some new service module on eCitizen. So I was like, interesting. I'd never seen this before, but so what else do they have in store? So a quick background, as some of you will know, I do write about tech, and the basis of writing about that is being able to get onto some things fast. So kitambo, what I used to do is scroll, I just scrape lots of sites looking for exclusives or everything. So you'd go to these logistics handlers and you see what is being shipped where and try to connect 1 + 1. Yeah, Evo. So basically, so a lot of these logistics handlers are in between India, Vietnam, China. So if there's a phone launch coming, it's a very easy way of connecting dots. Now that was kitambo when I didn't have a lot of access. These days I have a lot of access, so I get to know information visually. So I just used a lot of that knowledge to go check what else, other than the service modules the Office of the Attorney General had added, what else is in store. So huko ndio niliona subdomain ya naitwa nani, Register of Political Parties. At that time there was nothing. So it had just been created and it was there idle. So I was interested in trying it out as soon as they put something in there. So what I did is I added another script that will run every day, and the day it finds something, it will tell me. So the day it finds something was, I think, the day it found something exactly when it went live, but I only noticed the day after because I was at home and I'm not checking a lot of this stuff. So the day after,
what did you find?
The site had gone live, and there was an entire welcome page and a way to just check through all those things. Basically, what some of you interacted with, to check if I could see if I could query whatever database they have in the backend and see if I'm registered to any political party. Not to be an alarmist, I shared that with a few people on that day one, because by the time we're sharing publicly, I think it was on day 3 or something. So I shared with a few people to just counter check. Maybe some of them are even in this chat, to just counter check, and then went on about my business. I got to hear back from them on the evening of the following day. They had replied earlier, but I was slow on my messages, and it confirmed what I thought it was anyway. So the following day, when I was done with Shughuli za Nyumbani, is when I actually came to just tell these guys, I don't know what you guys are doing, but I don't think this is right. Especially, I just spoke for myself. I was disappointed to find that I'm registered to ANC. To be honest, I don't know anything about those guys other than seeing them on TV and their party colors and their party leader. So I basically just came to see that what I didn't know is they had done the same for so many other people. So that was an entire chain reaction, and things went on over from there. I think in that intervening period between the support of going live and me sharing about it, I think any other person who's very hawk-eyed might have noticed it. Yeah, that's something I do often because I'm always looking for deals on plane tickets and sales, these things that I like. So basically the same thing is what I deploy. And that's why I was very certain that this belongs to wherever I thought it belonged to, right from the onset.
Because and who does it belong to, Chenze?
That's a difficult question to answer, and it's also an easy one. The easy bit is it belongs to the government, but that's very PR-ish, because I think there's quite a bit of information in the public domain about how that entire eCitizen thing works and all of that. So a lot of that can be disputed. The bit about the government is almost very cosmetic. It's from an operation point of view, but the rest of the stuff is still murky. Probably it's something that we need digging deeper, because there are lots of private entities and everything involved. But then that's now information I know from just reading journalistic work from other people. That's not information you get to see from just prying through what they are sharing for the basis of having the platform running and everything. The pointers you see there and everything don't provide any kind of exclusive pointers. So using just what I know as a Kenyan, we are told it's a government portal. So if I was a foreigner coming here and I need an e-visa to Kenya, I'd use it as something from the government of Kenya. But beyond that,
Chenze, sorry, let me just jump in there and ask a question for the uninitiated or people who are very afraid of technology. Maybe I should just speak for myself here. What you're saying essentially is that on the face of it, this is a government service that is being run by private entities. There's a lot to mine there, right? So who does, if I'm going on, so I went on today to register for a passport for my son, right? All of that information, all of my entries, perhaps is being seen or there's someone in between my conversation, my virtual and digital conversation with the government and me. Do they keep my data? Who holds that data in eCitizen?
Those are also questions that need answers to. Ideally, the government should be responsible and accountable to you for your data and all of those things. If I am allowed to speculate, I don't think that is exactly what happens, because with private players at play, your data is fair game. The information you share there is fair game, and where it ends up is something we really don't know. Because some of the things that shocked me about the kind of information these guys had about me, enough to have me registered as a member of a political party, is the kind that I have no idea where it originated. But it's the kind that if somebody else was to just use the system as is to verify what the political parties are uploading without any complaint from me, then there's a time that is me and I belong to that party. So how that comes to happen, I have no idea. And to be honest, I'm also not that confident that any of the things I do there are such that it's ni siri yangu na serikali.
So if I'm to get you correctly, you feel like this data breach that you found out was deliberate, it wasn't a test run, because the registrar of political parties has come out to say that this was essentially just a trial run, like beta testing of that service, and that that information really, it was just mock information. From your assessment, was it deliberate? Was it, was it poor design? Was it just someone who didn't know that what they were doing?
No. It was not. I wouldn't say it's deliberate. They just followed, because from the little window I had over a week of just knowing how they go about that, this is basically how they do it. They'll test something new on their test bed, They usually have, like if today you have to go check, they actually have quite a number of services that are inactive that will go active at some point. They do this often. It's just that there are not many people checking. So that's one. So when they say it was a test service, yes, there's some truth that they were testing. That's the portal itself, not the database. Wherever these queries are being returned from, that is not test. That is information about us they have somewhere. They're just building platforms where we get served. Yeah, and making all of that useful to us. So there are components of what they are saying that are true and some that are not true. There's not test database for Kenyans. That's our entire everything that we've shared with them that they have, and that is fair game. Yeah, and then regarding the portal itself, yeah, of course, that was tested, and that's why you needed to have an extra set of eyes to know that it's there, and you couldn't see it when you went directly to eCitizen.
All right. So this would be a great time for anybody who's on the call who might have concerns about their data and how it's being used by the government to share an experience and whether the information that was out there about what is happening with your data, even prior to this data breach, left you satisfied that journalistically there's stuff out there that you can rely on to be able to navigate these sites and take care of yourself digitally and your information digitally. Be great to hear if anybody has a comment at this time. You can just raise your hand or you can put it in the chat and Kathy, you can read out some of those comments. But Chenze, I want to just, carry on with you a little bit and ask now the bigger question, right? What is the state of Kenyans' data, especially as regards the data that is given voluntarily or involuntarily to the government? Who holds that data? I know that's a big question, but I'm pointing at some of the things that people might be concerned about. Where does that data sit, right? And Joy Chelagat in the chat, Joy, thanks for asking. What is the GOK's position on the sharing of our data? That's also another question that would be good to answer. I don't know if you have that answer, Chenze. There were a couple of people who are scheduled to join this call who have been looking at some of the laws that brought the Data Commissioner's Office into force, have been looking at some of our data laws, who could answer that question. But Chenze, please go ahead.
As per the safety of everything that we have, it's not guaranteed, and two, some of the things that I picked from the reactions to that data leak was what I liked was how people are very nervous. I don't know how they are very alarmed by how their data is. That should be our default, because if I'm to be honest with you, I wouldn't trust them with any of my data. But the nature of being a Kenyan is such that they have had quite a bit of supply of it between my birth and now, birth registration, all the schooling I've done and everything, and all those government applications we keep doing. So there's quite a chain of data. It's safety. It's something that from now, what the little that I know is something that is not really assured. Yeah, and it raises a number of questions. For somehow I think I actually signed some of those BBI things that were going, and I approved whatever they said, because what we had a window to is a very small set of how our data is being used. What we don't know is how many other areas, how that is happening, because up to that point, we've only had a purview of what third parties, basically companies that are service providers around here, usually do with our data. You'd go and find maybe your SIM card is registered to you, and then there are also others you never knew about that are registered to you. Those are the kinds of things we've known, or your mobile money, whatever. Those are the kinds of things that we've known. We never knew it was to this level, because if you're registered as a political party member, there are so many things you can do, including one, have your name appended as a record of being a delegate or whatever. These decisions that they keep making, yeah, as outlined in whatever structures that govern them. Then lastly, I'm not so well versed with policy and the legal framework and all of those things. There are things I read about from time to time, but not that well versed to answer the question of the legalities of what they are doing and all of that, and even the government's position. Of course, the position publicly, the PR version, is what they have said. The only thing I liked about that is they removed doubt about who that support all belonged to. They confirmed this was ours. Then they went ahead to say all that they said, this was testing, blah, blah. A lot of that we can break it down and see what was true and what wasn't. The support all, yes, under test. The data, nope, not under test. This is something anyone can verify. And
okay.
Yeah, and from past work that I've done elsewhere, this has been around for a while. In my experience, for the last 9 years, it could have been longer, but the first time I interacted with it was like 9 years ago. So it's been there for a while, which is why I was very skeptical about the other exercise that people did last year, because I've been aware of the existence of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Michael and Joy, you asked really important questions. So Joy, in the chat you're asking, and with all the global scares about identity theft and the type of data that GOK has on us, what protections do we have in place? And related to that, but now focused on the registration by the Office of Registration for Political Parties, the registrar rather for political parties. Who exactly is to blame for registering people without their consent? Is it political parties themselves or the registrar of political parties? If it is the political parties, at which point did they access our data? I think to answer Michael's question, and I don't know whether Felix Atandi is on the call, is on the chat right now. If you are, you can raise your hand, and we can refer to you. It's a question of and both and, right, and not either or when it comes to who's responsible, at least from where I sit. If political parties themselves had been collecting this information, then they must have been an arbiter in giving this information to the people who run that subdomain. Then there's also the Office of Data Protection, the Office of the Data Commissioner. Then of course there's the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. There's a number of players. I see that Felix is on. Felix, if you can jump in here and give us some insight, who exactly is to blame? And also maybe just referring to Joy's question about what protections we have in place. Felix.
Thank you, Alan. I hope you can hear me. Can you?
Yes. Would you mind putting on your camera if you don't mind, so that we can also see you?
I have a bad internet connection, but I'll probably try that.
All right. We'll buy it for now, but what we're interested in is the insight. So go ahead, Felix.
So yes, the Kenya Data Protection Act provides rights to individuals, including employees, customers, and citizens as well, to access, correct, and delete personal data held by any organization. And any organization that fails to comply with this relevant legislation face probably substantial fines, litigation, or reputational damage that can cost customers' data. Now, the hard part that finds us in this position is that the Office of the Data Protection Commission is trying to litigate or trying to find problems with the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, which both of them are government agencies. If I can just remind you, the reason why we have this legislation is probably to control how people protect. So basically data protectors, data processors or data controllers on how they manage data that is very personal. We find ourselves between a hard place and a hard rock, because the Office of the Data Commissioner is a government agency, and the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties is also another government agency. And when you look at the law, it regulates or it sets out legislation that probably a single person can represent multiple government agencies as a data protection officer. Let me give an example. Maybe say in the Ministry of Environment, or basically the Ministry of Labor, if there are multiple agencies that fall under such a ministry, say the Ministry of Labor, and they actually process, they get the data, process it, store it, and maybe disseminate it otherwise either to other government agencies or maybe sell it to third-party entities. A problem there lies in, because it means one government agency is selling data to another government agency. The Office of the Data Commissioner 1 or 2 days ago released a statement saying that they've seen whatever Kenyans have been complaining about, that being that people have been registered in multiple political parties without their consent. I was actually, personally, I tried to check myself, and I found out that I was registered to a political party that I did not subscribe to, or actually I did not know that existed. And when I tried to do a bit of forensics on it, it's very funny, because I think this brings another question. When the link that was put up for people to check if they are registered to a political party, if you do due diligence and confirm what that web form was doing, when you try to check if you're registered to a political party, you are not probably registered. But when you try to put in your personal identifiable information just to confirm if you're registered to a political party, it took you to a registration form. So basically, by the fact that you are trying to find out if you're registered to any political party, you are inadvertently registering yourself to a political party, or probably under the law, giving permission for yourself to be registered to a political party. We took that line. Obviously, there was somebody else who brought that matter to fact, and we tried to follow it up. And when we tried to follow it up, we found out that when you try to find out that you're registered to a political party, you find yourself registering yourself or giving out permission to register to a political party. It's easy to register because probably what they need is your ID number and your real name, your registration name. It's easy to get in. But now, when you find yourself that you be registered, let's say, for example, to a political party that you don't subscribe to, and you try to unregister yourself, you have to produce more personally identifiable information for you to be able now to get out of that loop. So let's say you've been registered into PDP party and you don't subscribe to that party and you want to get yourself out of it. The mechanism that was put in before they brought down the site was that you have to give out your ID number, confirm that is yourself. So basically give out your ID number, your phone number, your real name as registered in your ID, and also probably print out a form that you'll have to produce to the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties for you to be deregistered for that. The reason that the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties gave out was that they were just trying out to test out the system. That's a long shot. I wouldn't believe that, because before they brought out the system, I did my own research and I found out that whatever they were doing, when you're trying to find out if you're registered, you inadvertently register yourself.
Yeah.
And
So Felix,
also,
sorry,
yes.
just to jump in here. Look, you've taken us from you've taken us from the discovery that Chenze made to being put into this cycle where you just keep on giving more and more and more and more information, as well as raising another issue with regard to how, you know, the comportability of your data from one government agency to another, right?
Yes.
You've defined them as businesses, in, you know, or like in terms of the sale of the data or the transfer of the data from, say, the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties to say another government agency, right?
Yes.
In the law, is that legal?
It's illegal. Actually, there's a provision in the Data Protection Act where any government agency or any data controller or processor has to do a data protection impact assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, data protection impact assessment, in short, DPIA, means an assessment on the impact of the research processing operations of any customer data or any citizen of Kenya's data relating to identifiable information. And that is defined under Section 31(4) of the Kenya DPA Act 2019. Yeah. Now, as a legal instrument, the DPA says can trace its roots into the GDPR. Our DPA is basically a mirror of what the GDPR is. Mm-hmm. And what the GDPR does is it embodies many legal obligations and duties, including minimum requirements of Data Protection Act as it relates to data subject.
Shitemi in the chat, sorry, before you carry on, Shitemi is asking an important question. What's the difference between the data controller and the data processor?
So basically, a data processor is somebody who has accessed data either from a third party or from you primarily to process it. So that will, for example, let's take arbitrarily, and I don't mean to relate to them, say Safaricom. Now, Safaricom is both a data controller and a data processor. A data controller because it takes your data with your consent according to the law, and it will tell you why it takes the data, where it's going to use it, and if in case it's going to sell it to another third party, on what grounds it's going to share that same data. And obviously also it encompasses how long that data can be kept for. By law, it should be 90 days. And if it's past 90 days, if it passes 90 days, what are they going to use that data for? Now, Safaricom gets that data from you as a data entity or as a data subject, meaning it's a data controller. It gets that and registers it as you.
Yeah.
It's also able now to process that data to get analytics or insights out of that data as a data processor. So Safaricom is both a data processor, controller, because it gets data from data subjects, and also processes the data to get insights out of it. So maybe for marketing, for sales, or maybe for targeted advertisements. Yeah.
And in this instance of registration without consent, the political parties that benefited from this registration, they're not data controllers, they're not processors, but they're beneficiaries to an extent. How are they defined in the law? And secondly, what legal recourse do we have, right? What legal recourse is there? I asked this now before, now we turn back to everybody on the chat to see if there's any questions and any concerns that you have about some of the information that came out of that. But Felix, back to you, like, what is the status of the political parties? Because that's what Michael was asking essentially. Are they responsible? What's their status and what's their level of responsibility?
So political parties get data from their respective enclaves or whatever people they target. So if somebody subscribes to a political party, they would have to provide their personal data or identifiable information. And in that front, now the political party becomes a data controller because it gets data from multiple voters. On the same plate, that political party is also allowed to sell that data or distribute that data or process that data to their own advantage. Now they become also a data processor. Process that data, yeah. Now the problem herein lies because the Kenya Data Protection Act is in infancy stages. We've not even gotten into the middle way of how to process such data. We've only talked about how processor controllers can be registered. That has been done by the Office of the Data Commissioner. And we're also trying to work out how there's a legal provision in the DPA called Data Subject Access Request. What that means is that if you're a data subject, you have to have the ability to ask whatever or whichever company or controller or processor if they have your data, for what function they want to use your data for how long are they going to keep your data for, and if they intend to spread that data, whom they're going to spread that data from.
Yeah.
Now the problem down there lies in, because you are now in that stage, the commission hasn't put up processes or frameworks to process that. It's called a data subject access request in law. Now the problem therein lies again as well, because according to statistics, to process a single person's data, so basically you as Alan trying to ask a data entity that has your data, what data they have of you, and if you want them to process it, or if you want them to delete it, or if you want them to transfer it to somebody else, that total cost comes to $1,400 per single data subject.
So the data subject access request,
yes,
is costed to the person whose data has been given to data controllers and data processors, and they have to pay
yes,
to be able to access this data.
Yeah, so let me put it in a simple way. There are 3 pointers to that. If somebody already has your data, for them to be able to distribute it or maybe to tell you or to delete it, there are 3 factors to consider. The first one is cost. Is the financial and the human resource required to fulfill your request? So possibly you've requested Safaricom or a political party to maybe delete or ask if you're registered with them. Businesses that calculate this only by the person by hour rate. So we calculate it by the hour, and it's really expensive. As I told you, it's $1,400 for a single subject. And you also have to remember that third-party billing also must be included. So if your political party got that data from maybe eCitizen or Safaricom, it costs money for Safaricom to sell that data to a political party, or it costs money for eCitizen to sell that data to political parties. Another reason, one was cost, another one is capacity as well. Is the volume of requests of a business or maybe for the office of the register of political parties capable to fulfill in the required time frame, which is set out in law, to address all these requests? That one is no. The cost obviously is no. The capacity of the human resources or the technology is no, and also scalability. You might set out maybe in your budgeting that you maybe might receive 10 or 50 requests per month, but for this example, for the office of the register of political parties, you get like it's millions of people. Now therein lies scalability, the ability to address the expansion of that data privacy regulation, resulting in that growth.
Felix, before you carry on, I just want to pivot to QGilo, who's on the call. Yes. They've raised their hands. QGilo, could you unmute your mic and ask your question if it relates to what Felix is talking about, but ask your question anyway.
Sure thing.
Thank you very much. One thing I wanted to understand is, so it means that as much as maybe I filled the registration or the information I've given out through maybe my passport, my ID and everything, and also through my line. So it means that someone can use my data to make more profit or to make money out of it without even my consent. And then another question is this thing has been going on for a very long time. It's just that over the, let's say was it last year, the last election, there was some also information that was linked. And then this other one, you come to find that it's like it's a routine thing that is going on. Now to the common mwananchi, and then who doesn't even know that this thing is going on? What action can they take? Or because this is the Kenya that we don't have that law, that people don't even obey the law, as much as even if I want to go and sue people, how will I go about it? Because it's not something, we're not living in an ideal world or in an ideal Kenya that we are.
Yeah, great question, Gilo. Thanks a lot for that. I see two other questions, maybe that you can bundle them up, and Felix or Chenzo or anyone else on the call might be able to answer. I mean, the essence is, what recourse can we have if we don't know this information? Edward Kimori, you have your hand up.
Hi everyone. Edward Kimori here. I'm in the cybersecurity space, currently based in the UK, and I deal with data governance and data policy issues on a day-to-day life. So it's actually not a question that I was asking. I just wanted to, it could be tied into a question actually, and maybe our conversation can go into it. We have Data Commissioner's Office. It's clearly very underfunded, or just a name, something that we're putting in there. And the reason I'm saying that, because that particular Data Commissioner Office should have the tools in place to ensure that our data is secured. We should have processes in place. And you're talking about recourse. One of the recourse that we should have in this space is as simple as having a data mapping exercise being done, and having the Data Commissioner allow citizens to use that data mapping to check if the data is being used correctly, and also to request for that data to be removed. For example, if you find something, a picture of yours in Google, you can easily go to Google search and actually tell them to remove that image, and you file in a request. It'll take less than 5 minutes, and within a week, that image should be removed if you give them evidence. So why don't we have such policies and processes and tools in place within our Data Commission Office? So Namu, I think a challenge for you from me is try and get an interview with the Data Commissioner. We need to understand if they're facing any challenges, or indeed if they have the money to run that office, because otherwise I feel like it's just there to save face for the government that they have an office, but it's really a shell of an office.
Thanks a lot, Edward. Challenge accepted. We're going to look for the Data Commissioner and ask her these questions. I mean, there's lots of questions. I mean, Gilo, you also asked really important questions. What recourse do we have if we don't know? I'm seeing in the chat, Joy is giving an example. You remember all of those unsolicited SMSs that we get prior to an election. What recourse do we have? And Felix, you pointed to something that seems, from Edward's comment, a little insidious. Why is it that the cost would be so high and transferred back to the person who's actually making money for these organizations? And also to the question around the political parties themselves who are beneficiaries in this instance, right? So there were neither data processors, nor were they I forget the term, but you see, they benefited on the back end from information that we did not give willingly, right? So in what way do they exist in the law, and what recourse do we have? If you have one or two things to say about this, so that we can get more comments. I saw Preston had also raised his hand. So Preston will come to you just now. But Felix, if you can answer those questions.
Yes, actually, I can answer those questions. You see, the Kenya Data Protection Act is actually a mirror of GDPR, as I told you. So we can actually draw very many parallels from what the GDPR is doing, and also expect the same for what we do. Now, for one, the implementation of the Kenya Data Protection Act is in the infancy stage. I want to say that because even for the data subject access requests, the far that we've gone is the Commission asked for requests for comments on how to legislate for the same. So we cannot actually implement it because they're in the data in the public request stage. So they've not really even implemented the same. And you see, as long as we have the act itself, we require policies, guidelines, as well as guidelines basically on how to go about this. And this is also can actually be drawn from what the GDPR did. The cost of doing some of these data subject access requests is expensive, as I said. Even for the GDPR as we speak right now, it is very expensive. And the only recourse that a data subject can have, if actually let me put it in stages. We don't have a platform for the data subject to request or to complain for the same, you see. Whatever the Data Commissioner's Office does is very manual, that you have to send an email for either their staff to look at every email and process the same. And some of these things we've gone past them. You can automate these things, yeah? You can have an automated system that can access or can accept such requests and maybe profile them according to the need or to the urgency. And some of them can actually be responded to by automated systems. We don't have that because we don't even have a guideline on how to do the same. And also, most of these companies, especially companies, the data controllers and processors, that includes mobile network operators, that includes the CRB systems, that includes some of these online financial systems that offer credit or credit facilities. They take advantage because we did not implement our Data Protection Act. They take advantage of this. And remember, data does not expire. So for example, when you go into a building and that person logs in your data, maybe your ID and your name, they have so many books of such capacity, and they usually sell them for a priced fee. Even M-Pesa agents, they do the same. Before they take the books back to their employer with Safaricom, they do photocopies of those books and then sell that data. And when you sell that data for the first time, the only way you can do it is just now negotiate the price downwards, because if entity A, who is a Safaricom agent, sold this data to company A, and company A has made money out of it and tries to sell maybe insights with that data to another company, they wouldn't ask a price that they got it for, and it will probably go down all the way. And as I said, data does not expire. So most of these companies take advantage of that. They know there's no legal recourse on how to make them pay for it. And if in any case, if the systems were there, the only legal recourse for you as the data subject would be maybe to find that person who's misused the data.
Yeah.
Take an example of Facebook. Facebook was fined $5 billion by the Irish Data Commissioner's Office for distributing data, including Cambridge Analytica. Mm-hmm. $5 billion for a small company is a lot of money, but for Facebook is just little change. Now they usually put that that amount into their budget as an expectation that they will probably breach data protection legislation for whatever country they work for.
Yeah.
That's a trillion billion. I mean, they make hundreds of billions, and 5 billion is little for them. Even for Kenya now, as much as, let's say, for example, you are registered in a political party that you did not expect to be registered into, and you got your legal recourse for that, and you had to make that political party deregister you, as much as you had to produce more confidential data, the only legal recourse will be to find that political party, and the amount that set out in the act is very little. Yeah.
Aside from the recourse that we have in the Data Protection Act, there's the Access to Information Law, right? So can the same data be requested through an access to information request? I know it's long, it's laborious, but it's free. Especially if you go through the Commission for Administration of Justice, that's free, especially if you're a natural Kenyan who is seeking this information. Is that another way that we can get this information?
That's another way. Actually, using both laws, the Data Protection Act and the request for information. Actually, the request for information act actually is being changed as we speak.
Yeah.
So there's something in legislation for that.
Okay.
But even if you do the same thing, it will not be to the advantage of the data requester or the data subject, because as I told you, a data subject access request costs money, and it costs 1,400. So for you to ask a political party if they registered you to delete it, it costs you that money. If you want to ask and for them to continue, it still costs you the same money. If you ask and you want them to maybe restrict them to share that data, it still requires the same money.
Even if you go through the CAJ?
It will, yes. That will be that is the normal cost. So that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, Felix, there are a bunch of questions that have come in here, including one from Ron Ogoti. Before Ron asks, Preston, if you're still on the call, because you had raised your hand a little earlier, could you ask your question? You can just unmute your mic and ask. Okay, so if Preston's unable to ask, Ron Ogoti, you can go ahead and ask. Just unmute your mic and ask.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. Yeah. So my question is more around the mechanics that the current law provides. Specifically two things. One is how long can, under the law, how long can the data processor effectively hold on to our data for? Does the law provide for, does it cap it? Does the law cap the period in which they can hold our data? And then secondly, and it's quite interesting because Felix, you touched on it a bit, and that is my primary worry, particularly with my personal data. What we saw with Cambridge Analytica, the whole saga, the whole scandal from the elections a few years ago. So my second question is, does the current law as it stands, does it allow for, or rather, does it impose caps on offshoring of our data? Is our data, or are they able, effectively, the data processors, data owners, are they able to effectively sell our data outside Kenya's borders? In a nutshell.
Great question, Ron. I think there was someone else on the chat who was also asking a question. Jesse Kasuku was asking, and maybe Felix, you can answer the same alongside Ron's question. Is there also a requirement for data controllers or processors to show or prove how they got the data and if they gathered the data in a proper manner without making this data subject access request? Is there a provision for people to actually show that without those requests? You can go through both Ron's and Jesse's questions. Then to everybody else who's looking to ask a question, because we're coming to the top of the hour and we don't want to extend it too much, you can put all of your questions in the chat. We'll try and see if we can copy them onto a document. And because Edward, you had asked us to go and look for the data commissioner, Ms. Immaculate Kasait, we're going to go and do that. We'll send these questions to her, and hopefully get that. Kimori, just hold your question for a little bit. Felix, if you can just spend a little time answering that question, and we'll come back to you, Edward.
Yes, actually, the Data Protection Act legislates on how your data can be used. So data portability and all these other things. So it covers how when a data controller or a data processor wants to use your data, first of all, they have to inform you that they're getting your data. Then they also have to inform you for what purposes they're using that data for. They also have to inform you by law for how long they're going to keep that data for. They also have to inform you if they intend to share that data. Usually for the sharing part is another advantage, but the primary ones is the one I said for the first three. So if they say, for example, we're going to get your Jola Namu, you're going to get your data for 1 month or 6 months. If they want to sell that data to another subject, maybe if it's a bank and they want to sell it to another bank or an insurance company, maybe to get insights from that data, they have to inform you. Now, for the other question on how long do they have to respond, if you exercise any of your rights under the data protection law, the organization that you're dealing with must respond as quickly as possible. And by law, because we borrow from GDPR, this might not be later than 1 calendar month, starting from the day that they receive the request. So if you send the request today and say Safaricom or whatever company that you're trying to request receives it, and they have to acknowledge that they received it, you start counting from that day, 1 calendar month. By law, that's what's expected. Of course, we give our submissions to the Data Commission's office, because that's what you're trying to legislate now, making up those frameworks. We don't specifically have how long a data controller or a data processor has to respond to it, but in law is typically 1 month from the day that you acknowledge that you've received a data request.
Okay.
And I hope that's what's going to happen as well when they accept whatever we give them.
Yeah. Having made access to information requests outside of the data subject access requests, having dealt with government in making these requests, even through the Commission for Administration of Justice, yes. Procedures that are laid down, I'd be very doubtful that it will take a calendar month. But here's hoping that something actually works.
Actually, in law it is, because I can actually give you an example. Just recently, I think the president launched the ADI land, whatever,
yes,
information system. And part of my questions, because this is what I tried to do, was trying to ask if they did data protection impact assessment. So basically just trying to ask if they did the DPIA is going to take a lot of time, probably more than a month. It's been 2 months now. So by the time even they just tell me that they did or did not, I will now go to my next question on how did they go about it. And I promise you it's going to be longer, because actually some of these systems, part of the procurement system is also very flawed, because they usually give people who are not qualified to come up with these systems. I mean, the NMS, just take an example of Nairobi County. The land registration system was hacked, if you've seen the news, and they had to take it down as well. Even the
and construction permits as well were hacked.
The permit itself was more of an insider job, but it was compromised through hackers. And just trying to get that information, if in fact they were compromised, it's taken more than a month. So you also have to counter in the time that the government would, indeed, the Kenyan government would.
Yeah. Okay. Kimori, Edward, you've got a final question, and as you ask it, I'm just going to post into the chat place where you guys can subscribe to our newsletter, and you can add your questions in the comments there if you haven't added any in the chat right now. But before we go, Helen, thanks a lot. This is for your comment about it being mind-blowing and really informative. I'm learning as well. So Edward, go ahead with your comment before we wrap this up.
Yeah, so just a final comment and a challenge back to Felix. And actually, again, a challenge back to Immaculate Kasait. If you look at our Data Protection Act, I don't know if it was deliberately written like this, but it does say that you have a right to be informed as a data subject, which means that you can go to a particular company or the registrar of political parties and ask to be given that data. However, it does not stipulate what your rights are. It does not stipulate what happens whether there are any consequences if they refuse to do so, or if they refuse to provide your data. So there is a huge gap in terms of how the act was written. And I do wonder, is there then a legality issue in some of these companies and organizations then spinning it around and passing on that cost to the consumer, that particular 1,400? Why should you pay? They should be paying that. And then my final question to you, Felix, again, is on, you said the cost of automating this, unless I didn't hear it right, the data subject automation requests are costly. We have a lot of skilled Kenyans in NILAB and Nairobi Garage and all those guys. Why can't the government create a platform in which all Kenyans can genuinely go in and do those data processing requests? It should be automated. It should be free, in my opinion. And I'm hoping that they can get their act together at some point. But again, just final comment. Thank you so much, Alan. I've learned a lot today. And it's good to have this kind of spaces, talk about this kind of thing. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. That's really kind of you, Edward, and great questions. I know, Felix, we're kind of out of time. So what I'll do and what we'll do is that we're going to reach out to you, Felix, after this call, see whether you can do some articles for us on the same. We are coming up with a couple of articles and a series of stories in advance of the 2022 election. I know this is kind of removed from the subject that we've been discussing, but data rights, data privacy are going to be a central question.
It's actually going to be very central for the election.
It's going to be a central question in this upcoming election. And therefore we need to start talking about it. We have this forum once every month, we've shared. Shitemi, thanks a lot for sharing the right link to our newsletter. You can register to our newsletter there. You can get updates from our second newsletter on when the next Join the Newsroom will be for the other conversations. And we are going to follow up on this in terms of our reporting, making sure that some of the many questions that we have, we've heard and have been asked here will be answered, including that one of 1,400. Who has $1,400, dollars to ask a question? I wonder which Kenyan has that kind of money, right? So I'll end it here. Huge thanks to everybody who joined the call. Believe it or not, this has been our biggest Join the Newsroom so far. It's our third edition. Thank you to Emmanuel Chenze for your breaking down of your experience and how you found out and how the public has actually benefited from that finding out. So as for your leave request, we might consider it as long as you do more data subject requests, but we won't charge you 1,400, right? So we'll see you guys in the next conversation. We'll see you online. Continue to share and subscribe to Africa Uncensored and help us build more, public interest conversations around the things that matter to you. Thank you very much. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon. Kwaherini.
Thank you, Kwaherini.